And look, I have to ask you, Keith, there was a big announcement recently from Peter Dutton, and that was, of course, the coalition's nuclear policy, which I'm very excited about. I do like nukes, nuclear power, that is. But we have this strange opposition from Anthony Albanese and Chris Bowen and Labor generally to nuclear power. They go on about the delay and they go on about the cost. But at the same time, Keith, they're very, very happy to splurge probably hundreds of billions of dollars on stacking the grid full of 82% renewables by 2030, and they don't seem to care about delay when it comes to things like snowy hydro, which, correct me if I'm wrong, is going to take a decade or more to complete. So why this double standard? If saving the planet, Keith, is so important, why is the Albanese government so selective about its concerns about delay and cost?
I'd like to say something detrimental, but it might not be appropriate, Daisy. But the reality here is they've completely abandoned what matters, and that is cost and reliability. As I said earlier, you can't run the country on part-time power. It just won't work. And we've seen an assessment from Net Zero Australia, which is an amalgamation of University of Queensland, Melbourne, an American university and others. They've budgeted or estimated the cost of the current commitment from the Albanese government at $1.5 trillion. $1.5 trillion. And it still won't work. Still won't work. So we've put forward a proposition where we've elected 7 sites to be assessed. And clearly there'll be a process to go through for that. They are substantial and significant investments. It will be billions of dollars. There's no doubt about that. But if it was just an assessment on cost and reliability, well, you'd build coal-fired power stations every day and twice on Sundays, dozens of them. And that's what's happening in China and India. But if you are absolutely committed and dedicated and you have to have zero emissions, reliable power, well, nuclear is the only option. It's the only one that's there. And you talk about hypocrisy, Daisy. How is it possible that Mr Albanese and his team can be out there supporting AUKUS, which are nuclear-powered submarines, Virginia class, that will go to every capital city in this country and then turn around and say, oh, it's incredibly dangerous and that's why you can't have it on shore. But you can park it in the harbour, that's okay, and you can build it in Adelaide, and it's all right if you build a reactor, but it's in the UK, and there's no benefit to the Australian people from that, apart from eventually getting erected. And Mr Miles, Daisy, his argument in Parliament, and I know you'll love this one, the difference between nuclear for electricity generation and nuclear in a submarine is the submarine one is enclosed. It's enclosed. I mean, seriously, where do they get these people?
I know that is the most ridiculous arguments they're putting forward that are anti-nuclear, particularly when, like, isn't it 33 other countries around the world use nuclear power very, very successfully as part of their energy mix. There's a nuclear reactor already in Sydney, for heaven's sake, which I believe is used for medical research. So it is
since the 1950s.
Yeah, exactly. Since the 1950s. It's so ridiculous, Keith, that actually the Labor Party launched what can only be described as a meme war when this announcement came out. We saw this meme war break out following the announcement. I mentioned in my editorial they were all very Simpsons-inspired memes, sort of three-eyed fish and three-eyed koalas and just stuff that just bears no resemblance to what nuclear power is and how it's organised. So they're trying to perpetuate this stigma about nuclear power to Australians who maybe don't know that much about it. Do you think this stigma can be broken?
Oh, the Simpsons memes, they went down like a brick and tile glider. People, they hated it. They just, the Australian people, they don't want to be informed, but they actually want to hear about it. They're willing to give it a go and listen to our proposition. And if you want to use Simpsons quotes, well, Mr Albanese, you should stick with this one, and it's from Homer Simpson. It wasn't a lie. I was writing fiction with my mouth. And I think that's probably the most accurate description. So, we saw the three-eyed fish and the memes that ran around everywhere. But the reality is the Australian people understand that you can't run the nation on part-time power. You can't be weather-reliant for the entire economy. You can't have heavy manufacturing in this country if the power turns off whenever it feels like it. So this is the only other viable option, and we want to have that conversation, and we need to provide the information that the Australian people need to make a decision, and I think they're open to it.
And you know what? I think they are too, particularly with power prices. I feel like the Chernobyl panic, for instance, about nuclear power is, I think it's still prevalent in a lot of older people, which I understand, but certainly my generation and Generation Z, we weren't around for Chernobyl. I know younger people, younger than me, have a lot of support for nuclear. So I just think, I'm ranting here, Keith, but it's my show, so I'm going to rant. I just think it shows how
It's
little...
your rock show, absolutely.
I just think it shows, don't you think, how little the Labor Party thinks of the Australian people, how unintelligent the Labor Party thinks Australians are, that they think they can fool them with Simpsons-inspired memes about nuclear power. What do you think?
I think the mob will always get it right. It's a very well-known phrase. From memory, it came from a Labor MP, and the mob will always work you out, and the mob will always get it right. And right now, they've got people like Jim Chalmers, the professor of Jimbonomics, and Richard Marles and Anthony Albanese, and in particular, your favourite, Chris Bowen, are telling them just how good they've got it and just how much electricity prices are coming down and just how cheap intermittent wind and solar is. And yet when they get their bill in the mail, it's gone up and they can't afford to pay it. And now we've got federal and state governments providing enormous subsidies, one-off subsidies, which won't help you in the long term. It won't help keep manufacturing in this country. It won't make sure that your kids have an opportunity to learn an apprenticeship, for example, because those businesses just won't be here. They'll go to China, they'll go to India, they will leave this nation, and we've seen sovereign risk now. You got the Japanese ambassador came out and said there's sovereign risk in Australia. I mean, it's unheard of. And that really damages our reputation. It damages the ability for companies, international ones in particular, to invest. And that's bad for this country. Very, very, very bad.
It really is, and that's the tragedy of it, and the fact that the Labor engages in this double speak by telling Australians how good they have it. Meanwhile, they're still getting these very, very high power prices. We're looking potentially at another interest rate rise later in the year. It is just appalling. Keith Pitts, as I said, you're one of my favourite parliamentarians. Thank you so much for coming on the show, and I can't wait to see you again soon.